Mid-morning with Mike Graham. Talk Radio.
And it is time to welcome into the home of common sense the man that everybody does love to hate, Piers Morgan. Very good morning to you.
I think you'll find that most people love me now. I've become a national treasure.
Really?
You're the problem.
No, listen, I have for a very long time been trying to convince people you're actually really quite a nice guy. but I'm having more and more trouble with it, ever since you took on the government and your ego kind of exploded on Good Morning Britain and you decided that only you knew that COVID was the most dangerous disease in the entire world and only you could get the Prime Minister on to solve the problem.
Well, funny enough, you at the time, I remember, agreed with me.
No, I didn't know. I was agreeing with the lockdown at the time when it came.
That's what I mean. That's all I called for.
Yeah, I always thought
I just couldn't understand why the government hadn't locked down earlier, given what was happening in Italy. You agreed. You said it on this show.
Yes, I know. But the point is that now, funnily enough, we're also in agreement because I now think Boris Johnson isn't doing a very good job.
There we go. I'm not quite sure what we disagree about.
But I don't think there's any point in him going on your show just to be shouted at and interrupted.
Well, if he can't handle a bit of a rough interview, how can he handle running the country? Well, we know how he handles the running the country.
Well, exactly.
He ran into a fridge on the eve of the election to avoid an interview with Good Morning Britain, and he's been running into fridges ever since.
Yeah, but you and Cathy Newman the other day said you're going to march on Downing. Yes. You're not really going to do that, are you?
Yes.
I just said to Julie Hartley-Brewer, it's not a very scary prospect. Piers Morgan and Cathy Newman are coming.
Hide! You, as a journalist, a fine journalist, who's worked with me for many years over the years.
It's true.
And is a fearless campaigner for freedom of speech.
Yes.
You should be supporting me against this government boycott, not just of Good Morning Britain, but also Channel 4 News and BBC Newsnight. It is a dereliction of their democratic duty to the voters, our viewers, who pay their salary.
Well, I would agree with you about perhaps the fact that he should be doing more interviews. He should be doing something with me. He hasn't done any with me either.
But there you go.
But on the other hand, I don't get all petulant about it and go, oh my God,
You're already shouting at me like I do against the ministers.
because I want to give you some of your own medicine.
Do you not understand there's a slight hypocrisy of this position of you bellowing at me whilst urging me to stop bellowing?
No, not at all.
Come on, Graham, you've never been... You've got to be more sincere than this.
You've never been bellowed at in your life.
Stop shouting, Morgan! You've
never been bellowed at in your life. That's the thing. I mean, you run that place, right?
I worked for Calvin McKenzie. I've been bellowed at.
That's true, but you were much younger then, right? But nowadays, right, you run everything. I mean, I've watched you negotiate your own new salary package live on air, right? And you threatening to walk off the set if they didn't give you something in your ear.
You watched me with sneaking admiration.
I did actually,
and thought I wish I could do that.
I mean, there is the one main difference between you and I is that you make massive amounts of money, and I'm very much undervalued here. Although, of course, I do very much enjoy working here.
There's another difference, which is that you think you speak for the people.
I do.
It's quite clear from all the polls at the moment that people agree with me and Keir Starmer. How do you counter the fact that 68?
That's very easy.
Well, 68% of the country in the YouGov poll support the restrictions because they understand.
They don't know
how serious. Well, okay, you're saying the polls
are wrong. Yeah,
okay, well, completely
Call
wrong.
me old-fashioned.
But if it's said
the polls were wrong about Brexit, the polls were wrong about Jeremy Corbyn, the polls were wrong about Theresa May, and they were wrong about Donald Trump.
So if the poll has said 68% of people do not support it, you wouldn't mention it.
Well, the point about the polls is
you would mention it.
No, it depends on how you ask the question, doesn't it? If I said to you, would you mind walking with me down to London Bridge and having a pint of beer? Even though it might in fact be breaking the new COVID regulations, what would you say?
I think the interesting thing you said earlier was about the fact nobody understands the rules.
That's true.
That is the biggest problem about this. And that's why, in a way, a clean circuit breaker lockdown, at least everyone can understand what that means.
Yes.
At the moment, you could be living literally 4 streets away from each other in the northwest of England, and there's one rule for one lot and one rule for the other. Nobody understands these rules, so people are beginning to treat them with impunity. That in itself is dangerous.
But are we not in a terribly bad place when you have, I don't know if you saw the video on Twitter last night of a Liverpool gym owner who's saying, look, I'm not going to throw people out of the gym. Before he knows what's going on, there's 7 armed police officers outside his gym sort of urging him to shut it down.
If you're going to publicly...
nonsense.
Well, is it?
But this is what you're calling for.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
I'm not. I'm actually calling for very practical, common sense restrictions.
Yeah.
I don't want a national lockdown any more than you did.
Right.
I didn't want it last time. Nobody wants to lock down the country.
It doesn't do any good. We know that.
It does. What it does, it buys you time to suppress the virus, which, by the way, right now, today, we are in a critical second phase of this pandemic. I listened to you in the summer, and quite a few of your colleagues here. It was all over, apparently.
Well, it was all over.
This was supposed to be all over.
Well, it was all over.
Well, it wasn't all over, was it?
Well, this is it. The point is that it's never going to be all over.
You were certain it was all over. Well, I kept saying to people, this is not over.
I said I had a bar of soap in my sink in the bathroom, which I said by the time it's finished, this will be finished.
Right.
And it will all be finished.
you were wrong.
Well, it's still there, the soap. So I'm holding out for that. It could well be.
Just admit you were wrong.
I don't admit that I'm wrong.
You repeatedly underplayed the threat of a second
that's not
wave.
true.
And we're now having the second wave you never thought would come.
No, absolute rubbish. Because I didn't say the second wave would not come. But what I did say, and I've got plenty of scientists who will back me up, that the second wave is nowhere near as dangerous. If you look at the actual hospital
Tell that to the ICU doctors in Liverpool who are saying the complete opposite.
Well, they are saying the complete opposite, but they're also complaining about being locked down. I don't know what they're going to do in Liverpool. Same in Manchester. They've been moaning about having a lockdown.
Listen, surely we can agree.
Yeah.
Right? If we put aside any of the tribalism, which we know wrecks any debate, and right now everyone's an expert epidemiologist.
Yeah.
Let me just state for the record, I'm not.
Yes.
Carl
Hennigan is, though.
I don't have all the answers.
But Carl Hennigan has a lot of the answers.
Carl Hennigan has one set of answers.
Yeah.
I have a lot of scientists who have a very different view, including the government's own SAGE advisory committee. Now, whatever you like.
I think they're a waste of time.
Okay, but they are
waste of time.
Okay, but that's because you like the scientists who confirm your view.
Well, no, I don't like sage scientists telling me that I'm
what you don't want to hear.
No, it's not what I don't want to hear. But they're going to save some lives over here. But look over there. There's a lot of people dying because they haven't got a job. They haven't got a house anymore. Their family can't be supported.
Let me respond to that.
And they are completely destitute.
Let me respond to that.
And that's far bigger.
The government in the first wave of this was absolutely negligent in a number of ways. First, they sent 25,000 elderly people out of hospitals back into care homes. That wasn't the
government. Well, that was Public Health England.
Sorry, it comes under Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary.
No, but it wasn't.
Sorry, I'm afraid they are accountable to the government.
Well, maybe they are.
Maybe they are.
But you can't say trust the scientists on the one hand because they're telling you the truth. No, you can't. I'm interrupting you.
Okay.
And then Public Health England, right, who are also scientists and also people who look after the public.
They come under the government, Mike.
Yeah, but the point is that you're saying listen to the scientists, right?
No.
Yes, you are. Well, you just said that.
I literally was just explaining to you what the government did wrong,
right,
and why they were negligent. And one was in sending old people back into care homes without testing them,
with scientific advice,
which we know caused a second epidemic, right? Secondly, they said they saved the NHS, but they did that by not giving people treatment for ongoing diseases like heart disease, strokes, cancer, and so on, which was a terrible dereliction of their duty as a government to protect the citizens.
Yes.
Thirdly,
but we were supposed to be saving the NHS, right?
They did protect a lot of businesses under the furlough scheme, but many people slipped through that net. Millions of people slipped through that net who had been maybe self-employed.
And I've been critical of them for that as well.
And they should be hammered for that. It is the government's responsibility to cover all of those things.
But do you accept,
and this time we're heading into a second wave where I still don't see that they've got the building blocks in place, least of all a testing system.
Well, there's no reason
that actually can control this.
But there's also no reason to believe, even the World Health Organisation, which I assume you will take as a reasonably good guide to advice for what governments should do. They're scientists.
Are they scientists you believe or not?
Well, I take all scientists' measures and I say, well, look, this is what some scientists are saying. The World Health Organisation says a lockdown is not actually in and of itself.
But what else did they say?
They said it shouldn't be used as a primary source of shutting down the virus.
But they also qualified it by saying what you need. A lockdown buys you time to sort out your testing system. We have a catastrophically bad testing system. Look at China last week. One city in China.
You can't believe anything from China.
Okay, you can believe this.
What?
Because it's an interesting template for
Go
us.
on.
Because also they did it in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So in China, they had a city of 9 million people. They had a breakout, I think, of 7 or 8 cases from a bar.
So they say.
And they tested all 9 million residents in 5 days.
Well, you can do that in China.
Right?
You can put a gun at their head and say, take this test, please, we'll shoot you.
They don't have that strategy in New Zealand. Well, they did the same thing. They had a few cases break out recently.
There's more people living in my street than live in New Zealand.
They're an island like we are.
Yeah, but they're a very small island with a very small population.
So is Sweden, but you're about to tell me Sweden's the answer.
I'm not about to tell you Sweden's the answer. I've always been quite sceptical about people who use Sweden as an answer.
We should all be sceptical of anyone.
I'm sceptical of everything.
So
this is why you should stop blaming the government for absolutely everything, because there is no government.
I can blame them for their failures.
Well, you can, but you can't blame them for absolutely everything if they're taking scientific advice. Whitty and Valance, right, the brothers Grimm, as I call them, are the sort of people that if you sat next to them on a train would be telling you how desperately dangerous it is because it might crash. They're pessimists. They're people who don't have any understanding of business, don't have any. I mean, I was in a restaurant last night, good friend of yours,
very good friend of
who sent you his regards, by the way.
Good man, yeah.
He didn't say, I don't know what's gone wrong with Piers, he's gone completely mad. I'm trying to get him to say that.
But I'm not sure you know what's gone wrong with me. It seems to me I probably agree with most of the stuff you've been saying.
But you've now started singing from the old Keir Starmer hymn sheet. Keir Starmer is not the man to back.
Why don't you ask me what I actually think?
Oh, so now you want me to ask you the questions you want me to ask you?
You seem to have got some opinion that I'm massively different to you. I'm not sure I am.
Well, tell me what you do think then. What do you think about the Tory party, for example?
The Conservative Party right now, I think, is ripping itself apart. I think Boris Johnson is not a leader. He's been found out. He got elected by being the great great cheerleader for Brexit. I voted against Brexit, but as you may recall, I was also a cheerleader for it being delivered.
Yes, indeed.
So I believe in democracy and in fairness.
you still believe that, do you?
Absolutely.
So you want to leave the European Union?
I do not want to leave the European Union, but I believe that Brexit should be delivered.
Yeah.
That's the way the people voted.
Yeah, exactly.
I've always said that
Exactly.
loudly. But on the government's handling of the pandemic, I can't see anything they've done that hasn't been a total disaster.
Well, I think you're wrong there because you yourself have said
name
the
one
furlough.
thing.
Well, the furlough scheme I think was a very, very.
Furlough
some
scheme is
people
good,
think it was a mistake.
But millions slipped through the net.
Yes, they
and now
did.
we come
Yes,
off the
they
furlough
did.
scheme onto a far less impressive scheme.
Well, what should they have done?
Well, look, the government.
How about that for a question? You
tell
you won't be able to answer that.
I will. Here's what the government
Go
has
on.
to do. They have to cover it all. They're the government.
They can't cover it all. You
They
tell
have
me
to.
one.
If the
you
government
tell me
orders
one
a
government.
nightclub or a restaurant or a bar to shut, they have to cover them economically.
Yes.
Because they have a valid crowd of people that want to come.
Yeah, but
who can't
now,
come.
we've got all this tier 2 and tier 3 stuff going
Yes,
on,
confusing.
which is what you called for, right?
No,
you called
no, I
for
didn't
regional
call for that.
regional lockdowns.
No,
didn't you?
I didn't.
Are you sure?
Yes.
All right. Well, you wanted more lockdowns.
I think
though.
it's way too confusing to have
It
a
is.
tier system.
It is-
And
it
by
is
the way,
confusing.
they're changing every 10 seconds.
Well, that's the problem.
So to me, we should be all in this
Yeah,
together.
but all right.
If we're
Well,
going to
tell
do
me-
it.
well,
Let's
tell
have a
me-
short circuit break.
Tell me,
And the public
by the way,
agrees
it's
with
the
me.
people's lockdown. I'm calling it that. It's not the circuit breaker. I'm not having any
Whatever
of that.
you want to call it.
We'll call it the people's
It's easier
lockdown.
to understand. We know how to do it. We've done it before.
Yeah, but it's not really a proper lockdown.
You yourself
Look at
said, if I
every
may
place-
quote you, your
All right.
own words.
Right.
You
Are gonna
yourself,
start quoting me now.
You yourself on April the 6th said that to just stay at home was not an infringement of your freedom.
No.
You said it's important to remember in an unprecedented situation. I really don't think being asked to stay at home and just go out for food or a walk is a massive problem. Mike Graham, April the 6th.
Well, in April the 6th, that was absolutely
What's
right.
changed? The virus is the
absolutely
same.
right. Well, the virus isn't the same. The virus is a much weaker virus
It's
for a
not.
start. Yes,
That's
it is.
completely untrue.
Yes, it is. The
No.
numbers game that
Sorry,
the government is
it
now
is not.
playing.
The
Hang
treat-
on. The
Sorry, no, you're
you can't,
wrong.
You can't interrupt me interrupting
But you're
you.
wrong.
I'm not
You're
wrong.
stating a scientific
Well, would you like me to
falsehood.
show you a graph which shows me that the number of hospital admissions is way far below what it was in March, what it was in April, and what it was in May?
Again, completely untrue.
Well, if you want to start quoting things at me, I
Hospital
can quote
admissions-
to you. I can quote to
Can
you.
I just respond to you?
Well, no, you can't. You can
Okay.
respond in a minute. May
Okay.
the 10th, and I don't even have to look at my phone to remember the
Yeah.
quote because that's how important your
Yeah.
quote is to me. You said that you were banning all cabinet ministers from your TV show.
No, I
and
was
you were not
responding-
interested in talking to any of them.
I was
and now you're moaning that none of them will come on.
Yeah, as you know, that was a joke because they had already
it was a
banned,
joke?
Well, they'd already banned us.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's called a joke. In the old days, you used to laugh at things like that.
Yeah, but you're not that funny. Piers.
But now you're so self-righteous, you can't.
I'm
find
not
yourself
at
in
all
your thing.
self-righteous. Let me give
But
you some.
you've just stated a series of falsehoods. There is no
Falsehoods.
scientific evidence there's any weakening of the virus.
There
what
is
has
actually.
changed? No, what has changed is there are now drugs that can help stop people get seriously
Yeah.
ill.
So the situation has changed.
the
then.
virus
so you would
hasn't
agree
changed.
with that?
That's what
Yes,
I-
it has.
No, it hasn't.
Yes, of course it has.
No, the treatment has changed.
Because here's the problem.
The
right?
virus
Do
hasn't
you- all right,
weakened.
all right, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in the testing system?
When it works, but it doesn't work.
Right, so it doesn't work. And yet you believe that all these positive tests are actually positive.
I don't know if they're all positive.
So
or not.
why are you saying there's a big problem then? How do you know there's a big problem if those tests might not be
Because
positive?
it may have escaped your knowledge, but our testing system is completely fractured.
It is fractured. So why would
and only
why,
one in,
so why are
and
we
only
doing
one in five
things-
people in this country, when
Hang
they're
on.
supposed to self-isolate,
Right.
are self-isolating.
Yeah, but the basic question is all of this stuff that's being done is being done at the behest of a government who tells us that the rates are going up, right?
They are going up.
Well, yes, but they might not be
You
right.
don't believe them.
Well, I believe that
You
the
think
tests
the
are
virus
go-
is weakening,
No, well,
and you think the test results are all invented.
that's not what I'm
you
saying.
You don't believe
That's
the
not
poll
what I
that
said.
says most of
You're
the,
putting words
most
in my
of the
mouth.
country
You're
supports
putting
it.
words in my
You don't
mouth.
believe anything that doesn't actually suit your agenda.
Well, I don't believe much that comes out of this government, to be honest.
Yeah,
and
but
I
all
don't,
the three
I don't
things I
think...
just mentioned are facts.
No, they're not. You've just admitted that some of the tests might be faulty.
No, I didn't. You told me that.
Well, you said you don't think the testing system works.
I'm assuming when you're testing this number of people, there are going to be errors and things that slip through
Right.
the net. We know that.
We also know
but
that people...
I also know the number of cases, the number of hospitalisations in the northwest
Yes.
are now ahead of where they were just before the last national lockdown.
But do you know what happened before the last national lockdown? Most of the COVID was in the south of the country. It wasn't in the northwest, and so therefore you're comparing apples and oranges. The point is, you've said let's not be tribal. But in the end, you go
What
right
tribe
down,
do you think I'm on?
You go down this lane. You're in the Piers Morgan tribe. You always were.
Well, that's a
It's
great
all
tribe
about
to
you.
be in.
It's always about you.
You used to be in my
I
tribe
did
when
used
you
to
worked
be
for
in-
me.
Yeah, but I know it's true. Well, I had to be then. You know, that was.
Can
the
we
point.
talk about my book?
Let's talk about your book because
Because actually, there's a lot of stuff in the book you will agree with.
There is a book here, right? It is called Wake Up by Piers Morgan. This is your fourth book, is it?
It's actually my 11th book.
Your 11th book?
Yes.
Yeah, but you don't count those ones like Take That you did.
I did an official biography of Take That.
You don't count that.
I actually did an unofficial biography of Philip Schofield.
Did you? Excellent. Well, let's talk about the book. I'll tell you what I do want to talk about, because I was listening to your interview with Chris Evans, and I don't think you got to Meghan Markle, because Meghan Markle, right, fascinating figure, who's only gone and invaded her own privacy, which is a great phrase that you invented, by moving to California. And she seems to be making at least one video a day in order to protect
with
her
Harry
privacy.
as some sort of hostage victim.
Yes, exactly right. I'm blaming her now for actually taking away one of the finest young men that this country produced,
But he's being
and turning him into a complete and utter patsy.
Well, they both become the king and queen of wokery,
Yeah.
and it's sad to watch, because Harry was very popular, very beloved in this country. He was contributing a lot, I think, and was the future of the monarchy. And now he's disappeared.
Yeah.
He's had to give up all his army allegiances, which I'm sure must be heartbreaking for him. But the contradictions are in their lives every minute of the day. That you can't preach about equality from an $11 million mansion in Santa Barbara.
No.
Full stop.
With 16 bathrooms.
And it's like when they preach to us about the carbon footprint when they're using Elton John's private jet like a taxi service.
Right.
This kind of constant hypocrisy really grated with
and
people.
this kind of just about surviving nonsense, and how she was the most trolled woman in the world. I really
Well,
don't
that came
think
as
that's
news
true.
to Donald Trump and, in fact, to me.
Yes.
And the worst trolls, actually, on the social media are Meghan Markle fans.
Yeah.
Who are the most vicious, abusive people you could ever meet. Also, she says that she came off social media a few years ago, and yet she seems very aware of what social media is saying about it. But it can't be both.
Also, I was amazed to see that some people were actually paying something like $1,750 to take part in a webinar so that they could hear the pearls of wisdom for themselves.
They preach about the environment, and then they get a private jet down to a conference where JP Morgan, who have one of the worst environmental records in the world, paid them, I think, $500,000 to speak about mental health, although what Harry did do in his speech was talk about the death of his mother again. I don't think he should be getting that kind of money to talk about the death of his mother, while simultaneously accusing the media of exploiting things like the death of his mother.
And also his poor grandmother, the Queen.
Horrific.
Must be absolutely going through torture watching
Heartbreaker.
this.
What about his grandfather, Prince Philip, who's nearly 100, who's been in ill health? These two are swanning around California doing Netflix deals based on their royal titles. And my view is, if you want to be independent and free, well, go and be independent and free. But don't call yourselves the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.
Well, I love this thing that he came out with where, we're hoping to become, financially independent. We're 36 or something, I mean,
He's never been financially
independent when I was 18,
He never has been. He's always been living off his father's money, and now they're living off the money they're making from trading in on the royal titles, which is ironic given how much they profess to hate everything the monarchy stands for.
But I think this is partly why on the book front itself, people are confused about you, right? Because you've written about the wokists and how awful they all are and how they want to shut everybody down and cancel everybody and all of that. But on the other hand, you're also kind of on their side on some of the things.
Like what?
You've said you're a liberal now, haven't you?
I've always been a liberal.
Well, you've never said that to me before.
Mate, I was editor of the Daily Mirror for 10 years.
Yeah, but you're also editor of News of the World.
Huh?
You're also editor of News of the World.
Yes.
And you also were...
I've never been right-wing.
Well, no, you've never been right-wing, but you have a sort of right-wing life, don't you?
Actually, my sensibilities journalistically have always been on the liberal side. The Mirror waged many, many campaigns that could only be categorised as liberal.
Yeah, but also you went up against Tony Blair and you said that you were against the Iraq War.
And I was just as, by the way, aggressive with Tony Blair.
Yes, you were.
When I was the editor of the Labour-supporting Daily Mirror, as I had been with Boris Johnson.
But you hired people like John Pilger.
And I was right, by the way, about the Iraq War.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. But you hired John Pilger, who's the left side of Jeremy
And I hired
Corbyn.
Christopher Hitchens.
Yes, you did. But I mean, in the end...
what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that it's all about Piers Morgan.
No, it tells me that actually I believe in democracy and democratic debate, and I believe in both sides of arguments getting a fair hearing.
So would you
as
like
indeed
to see,
we're having now.
Indeed. So would you like to see Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister then?
I think right now he's...
For God's sake.
Well, right now
You don't want it, surely.
I'm just saying right now he's showing far better leadership than Boris Johnson.
All right, let's talk about President Trump.
Yes.
Famously your mate for a long time. You won the
He still
Apprentice
is,
in
as far as I'm
America.
concerned.
Well, he doesn't think so anymore, does he?
Actually, we had a little exchange the other day. It was
Did you?
fine. Yeah, about... funny enough, I sent him an email by a friend of mine at the White House to say how funny I found it when he said about Prince Harry, I want to wish him luck, he's going to need it.
Right.
And I got a message back saying the president laughed out loud at your email. So I think we're fine.
Okay. So
It's a bit like you and me. We'll shout at each other for a bit. And then we'll go and have a nice meal at Il Portico.
And we will indeed. And what about Trump? Do you think he's going to win?
I think that last time everyone thought he was going to lose, and I kept saying I thought he was going to win. This time I believe it's almost an impossible mountain to climb. I think his handling of the pandemic and his treatment of the George Floyd story in America, which having worked out there, that was a time for him to be unifying and healing, and instead he poured petrol on the fire. I think that the combination of those two things and the fact that Joe Biden is a more popular candidate than Hillary Clinton, I think in middle America, in many of the swing states now, you can see Joe Biden pulling away in a way that with less than 3 weeks to go, almost impossible.
I find it very hard to believe that people
wins.
will vote for Biden, though, just because he seems like a man who's very much past his time. He's past his best. He's been, as Trump says, he's been there in Washington for 47 years.
Look, he's
achieved very little.
He's not the most dynamic of candidates, but what he does have is a lot of experience. He can be a calming influence, I think, at a time when America's never been more polarized. And he's fundamentally a decent man, Joe Biden. You know, he went through terrible tragedy. He lost his wife and his baby daughter in a car crash. Then his beloved son, Beau, died 5 years ago from brain cancer. He's been through awful stuff. And I think that gives him something Trump finds very difficult, which is an empathetic streak. And America right now needs healing, and it needs
it's in a terrible way,
and it needs a metaphorical arm put around it. I'm looking at Inauguration Day and thinking, who is going to be that healer? Donald Trump, empowered if he gets re-elected when he's looking slightly out of control at the moment, or Joe Biden, who might make a speech which brings America together again?
Very possibly so. What about the woke movement then? Do you see it ever ending? Because as we know...
Well, they're insufferable. I mean, I find them as insufferable as you do, and I would say that as a liberal. And I find a lot of people on the right wing insufferable. But when it comes to liberal, I describe in the book the history of liberalism. If you want to actually claim to be a liberal, you've got to believe in free speech.
Yeah.
You've got to believe in people's right to express a different opinion to yours. In fact, you've got to believe, as Winston Churchill said, in the right to have people really offend you.
Yeah.
And to accept that's what a democracy and free speech is about. So the book tells a lot of stories where we've just gone slightly nuts, haven't we? I mean, when I saw Google abandoning the egg from its salad emoji because it was offensive to vegans, I thought, what is going on?
Yeah.
When I saw Altrincham School for Girls say that you couldn't use the word girl in the school because it might offend the transgender lobby, and yet the school remains the Altrincham School for Girls.
Yeah. When
I heard radical feminists demand that James Bond should be female, all these things, you think the world has gone much. And then we get Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, a man who stands and says we've got to get rid of the word mankind. It should be called peoplekind. So we can imagine Neil Armstrong, can't we? Can you imagine the moon landing?
Yes.
And Neil Armstrong, one small step for a person, one giant leap for peoplekind.
But it's like all these museums as well. I mean, you know, Charles Darwin apparently, you know, is now being sort of looked upon by the Natural History Museum
Winston
as
Churchill's
statue.
Winston Churchill's statue had to be boarded up during the Black Lives Matter protests because idiotic fringe element of those protests, most of it was peaceful, but an idiot fringe wanted to attack Churchill's statue.
Yeah.
But we also had to board up Mandelas and Gandhis. I mean, this is the stuff of craziness.
But, you know, my dad used to say to me, and he was a very sort of wise character, he used to say, where do these people find the time? You know, who are they?
Energy.
Who are they?
There was a debate.
Who are these people who are constantly
Australia
marching around the city, constantly looking for something to deface?
Well, I think it's more looking. I think the Black Lives Matter protests, I supported them because I felt what happened with George Floyd and the way it was all captured on camera was one of the worst things I've ever seen. It was horrible, absolutely despicable. And I do believe.
But it didn't have much to do with London.
No, but I do believe even in this country there is more that we can do for racial equality. I do. I just think if you're black in this country, you don't have as natural a start-up in life as most white people. Not all, but most.
A lot of white people don't have much of a start-up in life either.
That's why I said not all. Yeah. But I do think you just have it a little bit harder, and we should recognise that. And we should try and make... I mean, for example, in football, the majority of the biggest stars in the Premier League now are black. And yet there's no black chairman or owner or even a manager of a Premier League team. That's not right. That means the structure of the game is still inherently biased against black people, whereas the game itself is played by a lot of black people who are fabulous footballers. Yeah. That can't be right. And we should be able to agree on things like that without that being branded a woke view.
I agree.
Because it's not, actually, although it is a woke view by the original definition of woke, which was to
before
just be aware
before
it was hijacked by the illiberal, liberal, fascist wokies. And that's what they are. They've become the very fascists they profess to hate. They want us all to live and eat and act and behave and drink and dress and sound exactly like them and their very narrow, humorless prism of the world.
Yeah. And so how is it going to end, though? That's what I'm saying.
With my book.
Your book's
because
gonna
my
end
book is
it.
called Wake Up,
Right.
and it's a clarion call to the wokies, my fellow extreme liberals, to actually wake the hell up and stop this ridiculous cancel culture and stop universities no platforming anyone that doesn't agree with their woke view, and actually go back to old-fashioned debate of the kind we've had today,
Yeah.
where we can agree about some stuff, vehemently disagree about other things, and at the end of it go and have a pint and be friends.
Yeah, except we
That's-
can't do that after Friday night.
No.
Because obviously it's all locked down.
Well, obviously, yeah. I'm not going to get back into that again. But I do think that's the bedrock of
Yeah.
democracy, and has always been the bedrock of this country.
Yeah.
And I think your listeners right now probably started off thinking, I hate this guy.
Yeah.
And they're probably all now cheering me on.
Yeah, they
And
probably
that's
are.
the contradiction you're talking
Well, we'll
about.
find
but
out.
I don't think they're inconsistent.
We'll find out, because I'm not going to read them all out to you, but I did have some really, really serious abuse from people saying, "Well, he's a petty-minded bully. Why are you getting him on?" And that's exactly why I'm
Are they
getting
talking
you
about
on.
you or me?
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering about. But that's why I wanted you to get a taste of your own medicine. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I loved it.
I hoped that we will be able to have a beer at some point soon. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I've got to do another 2.5 hours of broadcasting before I
I
get
think
out
you're a
of here.
brilliant broadcaster,
Thank
and
you.
I actually like it when you go after people. I think there's nothing wrong with passion. There's nothing wrong with having opinions. You do it better than most people on the airwaves. In fact, I can only think of one person that does it better.
Yeah, that'd be you. Right?
That'd be me.
Here's the book. I'm holding it up. He doesn't need the money, by the way. So,
But I do need the Instagram
but you
pictures,
do
so
need,
thanks,
but
mate.
you do need the Instagram. So listen, Piers Morgan, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you soon.
Pleasure.